Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your look at news from Taiwan and around the world. Donald Trump has been sworn in as the 47th U.S. president, and many are wondering what a second Trump administration would mean for the global world order. Joining me today is the Honorable Steve Yates, Senior Research Fellow for China and National Security at the Heritage Foundation, and a former Deputy National Security Advisor under Vice President Dick Cheney, and he's going to be sharing with us some of his thoughts. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to join you. Thank you.
Yeah, let's jump right in. And let's zoom in really quickly. What can we expect for U.S.-Taiwan relations under the second Trump administration?
Well, first and foremost, I think the biggest challenge is there's going to be a lot of activity. People have already seen with the inaugural and initial executive orders that won't at first appear to be related to U.S.-Taiwan relations, but it actually is very important for U.S.-Taiwan relations and others. And so the investment in reviving American energy to have it an abundant, affordable, resilient supply should put the United States in a position to be able to export more to Asian partners. That would be vital to our alliance system, to have a Pacific path to supply energy and not be subjected too much to the Straits of Malacca as a potential choke point. And so that's something that is domestic, and it's a very high vocal domestic priority, but very relevant to thinking about the durability of America's posture in the Indo-Pacific. When it comes to the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, there's a few things that are in the defense realm that should pick up and move forward. There's homework that the United States needs to do to improve the efficiency of our defense manufacturing supply chain. We've made commitments to Taiwan and others that are behind schedule. That has to get fixed. Hopefully this new Department of Government Efficiency and the new leadership at the Pentagon will succeed in shortening those time horizons and maybe even reducing costs. That's vital to us, but vital to our partners too. The economic agenda is fully open. So whether it is looking at kind of the joint development in high-tech semiconductors, but not just semiconductors in the United States, Taiwan's investment in America is welcomed. And I think there's work for the United States to do to make sure that that succeeds and maybe grows a bit. And I think that when we look at everything from energy to defense to just manufacturing, having secure supply chains, reliable partnerships are going to be key. And so having Taiwan play into what the U.S. does to rebalance and invigorate our alliances with Japan, Korea, and others will also be an area of opportunity.
When looking at the Taiwan-U.S. relationship, what will the Trump administration be prioritizing, whether it's getting Taiwan, the backlogs of weapons that the U.S. owes it, or some other defense policy that we're not seeing here?
Well, I think that there's going to be some familiar themes. If you look at how things were talked about during the campaign, it wasn't specific to Taiwan, but there's kind of a few baskets. One is he wants to lessen tensions. And so whether you're looking at East Asia or Europe or the Middle East, he's been pretty aggressive in early conversations about what can be done by way of dialogue and negotiation to lessen tensions and get the agenda set back on peace and prosperity themes. He's already opened up channels of communication with Xi Jinping, and that will continue, not necessarily to concede things, but to get a temperature take on where things are. When those leaders last really engaged as leader to leader, that was in the middle of a COVID pandemic that President Xi lied about to President Trump's face. And the world paid dear consequences for that. The fentanyl pandemic, which included taking my daughter, just exploded around the United States over the last 4 years. And so that is a priority that existed before but is greater now. And the Phase 1 trade agreement that was negotiated was not followed through. And so the president wants to get a sense of, okay, that did not succeed. Where are we and what do you put back on the table? And so I think that the lessening of tensions and then taking that temperature, but then rebalancing economic relationships and rebalancing security responsibilities is a theme in every one of our alliances and partnerships. I think the leadership in Taiwan is familiar with this. I think one of the most sensitive challenges is going to be the divided government in Taiwan and kind of the divided politics about budgeting and where things might go in that defense and other area. This is a really unfortunate time for domestic politics to play too large a role when I think from the United States and regional partner point of view, the national security stakes are pretty high for all of us.
How does Taiwan go about reconciling its budget issues, particularly with those in the defense realm, where U.S. policymakers have a stake in saying Taiwan needs to raise its defense spending?
Well, I mean, I'm sensitive to the notion that that Taiwan has its own constitutional process that it has to go through for special budgets and regular budgets, and there are democratically elected representatives in Taiwan who are duking it out on being checks and balances with one another. That is the process that people sacrificed their lives and struggling for freedom and democracy wanted to get to. But now we have sort of the difficult business of how do you, in a competitive and divided democracy, reach consensus on national security priorities, including the priorities that your most important partners might share with you. That's the heavy responsibility for the president and the executive administration in Taiwan, but it's also for the legislative leadership too. They have people who are in town from all parties here for the inauguration and otherwise. I don't speak for the Trump administration. They will speak for themselves pretty clearly. I think they're looking to see increases in defense budgets, but that's not the only thing. The significant progress being made on civilian resiliency, crisis management, these are steps in the right direction too, to prove that the people of Taiwan are committed to their defense and survival and have thought through in a meaningful way how to survive coercion, boycotts, other kinds of gray zone kind of activities that could pressure Taiwan. So there'll be the high profile, big ticket items that get debated on budgets, but some of these other areas help convey the message that the Taiwan people take this seriously, are committed to doing all they can and are making progress on what they can. If they do that, then I hope that Taiwan's leadership of all parties can communicate back to the United States that this is what we're doing, we're prepared to do more, but we need your help to be able to do more. Because in some ways, I'd have to admit as an American policy has gotten in the way of Taiwan having all of the options it might otherwise have for its own self-defense.
You said that the goal moving forward will be to reduce tensions. Now, one of the red lines that Chinese President Xi Jinping has said for this new incoming administration is on the topic of Taiwan. And it's likely that continued U.S. support for Taiwan, whether that's joint training programs or continued arms sales, would likely rub China the wrong way in relations to those red lines. What can the U.S. and Taiwan do to continue its regular exchanges while at the same time reducing tensions?
Well, I have every expectation that the regular exchanges will continue, but we would all have to take a step back and admit that the regular exchanges and the regular programs of the last 30 years have not been enough. That over the course of that many years, China's capabilities have raced ahead, and our allies' defense capabilities have not kept pace, and part of that is on the United States also not keeping pace. So we all have some catching up to do. I think that having creative conversations with neighbors in areas that might not be traditional defense, I think Coast Guard to Coast Guard cooperation in the broader region is really, really important for maritime security and building up confidence in the region. I think that cooperation between Japan and Philippines is a really important investment in Taiwan's security and kind of that first island chain having an alternative path to peace and prosperity. So any of those joint efforts, I think, is an investment in a good and stable future on defense.
Great. Mr. Yates, let's zoom out really quickly and talk about China, because that is where a lot of your research is. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently said that China is the biggest threat to the U.S.'s interests.
Yeah.
And Taiwan and the U.S., they're maintaining very, albeit unofficial, those relations are growing very strongly. What does it mean for the U.S. to balance this unofficial relationship with Taiwan and also confront this threat from China without this escalation in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, first I would say Secretary Rubio knows these issues exceedingly well. He might be the best prepared Secretary of State we've ever had in this policy area. Has very clear views that are in alignment with the president's. So when he's talking about the China challenge, I think most Americans agree that in terms of an external challenge to the United States, it's by far the most significant we've faced in maybe 2 generations. Now, it's also a different kind of challenge because it's comprehensive. There are elements in our domestic policy and politics that relate to CCP malign influences. There are areas of strategic communication that you might call information warfare, where they're very, very aggressive. We have issues related to media platforms and their ownership with the current TikTok debate that are ongoing. These are things that didn't exist in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. It's just sort of a testament to, I think, the failed bet that all of us made on engagement with China. So Secretary Rubio has his hands full, but he is extremely knowledgeable on this. I think he's going to be pushing back by making sure that if the United States and our allies are doing all we can to protect ourselves, to thrive economically among ourselves, to increase secure supply chains and lessen dependencies on those who seek to do us harm, all of those trends lead us to a more peaceful path with regard to coexisting with the People's Republic of China.
Looking at this giant, checkerboard here, what's going to be some of Trump's biggest priorities when looking at the China challenge right here?
Well, really, it comes back to energy and raw materials. They're some of our most sensitive supply chain vulnerabilities. If you're going to be a high-tech manufacturing export economy, you have to have access to rare earth materials. You have to have access to a lot of different minerals and raw materials. In recent decade or so, People's Republic of China has monopolized supply chains in some of these areas. So we have to do some things together with our allies to reprocess, store, and mine for these things to lessen that dependency. If we don't do that, then there's leverage that I think is insurmountable, where China feels like they have ways that can cripple us in a time of crisis, and they themselves have insulated themselves against sanctions.
On filming day, we're only on the second day of President Trump's second term, but from what you've seen, has there been a shift in President Trump's China policy, whether he's being more lenient or being more tough?
It is too soon to draw any conclusions about, broadly speaking, where this is going. In general, there's a lot of reasons why people should believe he will have relatively tough policies on national security, relatively aggressive policies to rebalance the economic relationship, and to try to make sure that there's some accountability for COVID, for fentanyl, for some other issues that have had a massively damaging impact on the American people, and we know that the CCP is responsible. So there's every reason to believe those things will move forward. But there's also every reason to believe that he will seek to make some kind of a deal that tries to find a stable, survivable resting place for U.S.-China relations to be, so that you can manage the sort of tensions while continuing to pursue prosperity and security for our allies and partners, but living every day on the edge of a potential Taiwan crisis, South Sea crisis, Senkaku Islands crisis. That's not where President Trump wants to be. And so we'll see whether he's able to reset that sort of chessboard. But those things are going to be going on. The first 2 days, the first 100 days are not going to be sufficient to draw conclusions.
Well, Steve, we're just about out of time, but it's been so fascinating talking to you about the U.S.-Taiwan-China relationship under a second Trump administration. I hope we can have this conversation again soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more stories from Taiwan, please download the TaiwanPlus app or follow our social media. I'm Leslie Liao in Washington, D.C. Thank you for watching.